Well, welcome, podcasters, to another episode of MProper Mimi, where we talk about empowering women at home, work, and play. Today, we're going to have a conversation with a beautiful young lady that I have the pleasure of meeting. She's a great speaker and actually a new author. She just wrote a book last month, February, Black History Month. It came out. So I want to introduce everyone to Kristie. And Kristie, can you tell us a little more about yourself and what it is that you do and why you love it so much?
Yes, and thank you so much. I'm super excited to get the chance to be on your podcast and really just connect with you and your audience and the people around you. So Kristie Tobias, I am by day a corporate businesswoman. So
right, and a superstar at night. Yeah.
But I actually have the privilege from a corporate work perspective of traveling around, well, pre-COVID, traveling around the world, focusing on how to help organizations manage and lead through change. So as you know, most organizations go through just about any type of change all the time. My background has primarily been healthcare. So as you can imagine, that is a beast of undertaking. But that is a lot of what I do is I help organizations and businesses from the corporate side understand how to lead through change, understand how to connect and engage with their leaders from the top down, and really infuse and embed the meaning of how do we be successful with our people and not just throw changes at our people. So it's kind of what I do in that corporate setting. A lot of that then leads into like the personal professional life for me because I'm a national speaker for my company, but I'm also a national speaker outside of the company too. So I do a lot of speaking within our organization for a lot of our conferences, for just kind of one-on-one leadership institutes. And then that kind of bleeds out into my community work where I live in Pensacola, Florida. So I'm one of those people that's like, I bridge my personal and professional lives together. Like there's no separation for
There's
me.
no way to separate because it's just your personality, right? You like here and there and everywhere.
And I was never really super comfortable with that until like, I'm 35 now. So until I like got into my 30s, I was like, you know what? We're just going to enjoy and embrace the gifts that you have and share those in a way where it does help you connect and engage better across the board, both professionally and personally. So I love getting the chance to speak, which is actually what led me to writing the book, because there's this whole dialogue around my book, Fearlessly Made You, which, oh, look at this. Yes. I'm going to have a copy right here. Just in there. But it's so cool to be able to do all that. So it's like if people ask me like day in the life, like what do you do? I help people understand that change, it happens, but it doesn't have to happen to you. You can own and lead through that change. And I do that across professional and personal life. So I think that's kind of the best way to like sum it up in a cute little sentence.
And that's great because it really kind of brings it all together, like who you are. And like you say, you're not separating yourself, from work and from play and, like home. And this is you and everything that you do. You go out there, you connect people, you talk to people, you meet. And I love it. I mean, I consider myself a connector. I'm like, man, I wish I could get paid to just network, to just network and meet. That would be the life, right? To just travel and meet and talk with people. But alas, yes, my day corporate job is more like corporate real estate, but it's still like a lot of people connecting and negotiating and teaching and training people, so I started the podcast MProper Mimi, kind of to just have that freedom,
I love that name, by the way, because it's perfect for you.
Thank you. Like growing up, it was kind of like, don't, be seen, not heard, don't say this, but now I'm like, I can say whatever I want if it's improper or not, but I still sometimes feel, a little constrained, like it could be in what I'm wearing or what I, how I present my image at work. And that's one thing I really loved in your book. Like you were talking about your image, like how we are kind of grow up or have this image about ourselves. And then it's almost like, at what point do you realize like, this is going to be for me, it's not going to be an image for somebody else, but you're going to start living your life for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I love that you say that because it's so interesting how image has evolved. And it's funny because just from the physicality of image, a lot of people would be shocked to know like what that has meant for me. And you read it in the book, but like starting out with like a Black woman's hair, like, which is a huge thing. Like people think hair is just hair, but especially in the Black community, hair is not just hair. Yeah. And there's something that's powerful behind that because especially like in our corporate jobs, there is a look you're supposed to have, which let's just put it bluntly, is always white woman look. And I'm like, that's, first of all, let's break that down. But second of all, it's because I'm sure like you, I've always been surrounded by middle-aged white men. And there is an expectation of how you're supposed to present yourself. And to your point, being seen, not heard, don't ruffle feathers. And it's kind of like once, I shouldn't say I got over that, I was pushed into a different direction because it was no longer successful for me. And so I had to make this shift of, are you going to be authentic, or are you going to be the person that someone wants you to be? And in that shift, I started to own, like messily own what my image looked like, and cut off all my hair, went natural, cut off all my hair, started coloring it purple and pink and blue and lavender, and nobody cared, which was the interesting. Nobody cared. They're like, okay, like this is easy. And I realized I cared more than anyone else did. Not to say that that's perfect. Like there are people who would say something, but when I stopped making it a big deal for them, they're like, oh, okay, we know that this is not something that is any of our business. Like, exactly. Your opinion isn't my business. It doesn't impact the way I do my work. It doesn't impact the person that I am, but it does impact how I feel about the person that I am. And I love that about myself. So it's cool and interesting that you say that that's one of the chapters, because that was an interesting chapter to write too, because it went back to like my days of in the pageant world where I grew up in North Carolina. I was the only Black woman on stage. I was the only one that was like under 5'8". I'm like 5'3" on a good day. I work 6 inches on a regular basis.
So you really stood out of the pageants, as a Black woman, and everyone else are these like tall white girls.
Yes, and the long hair. And I did the weave thing for a bit, which I personally like, wear whatever hair you want, but it wasn't me, right? Like it just didn't feel like me. And then also like weave is a lot of work. Like people feel like it's not, it's a lot of work.
You got to take care of it. You got to take care of it underneath it. You got to go there, put in and everything.
Yes, it was just, so I just had to, you got to be you. You just got to be you.
Exactly. I never was one to really mess a lot with my hair. And then even with it natural, it's still a lot of work because you want it to be tight, right? You want it to always be in place.
Yes.
And it's funny because I was reading Hood Feminism, I think by Michael Howard, right? And I was reading it with my daughter. She's a young working woman, as she says. She's 27, okay? and we were reading it with some of our friends, and so we're getting the multi-generational view on it. And parts of it, talking about image, I guess I never realized like how much I told her. I'm like, you need to wear this, or you need to wear that, or you have to present yourself this way. And her growing up in Boston, it's like she wasn't the only Black kid at school, but it's the Black students were definitely the minority. So I'm like, you have to present yourself in a certain way. And then now that we're older and hearing her talk, and then hearing me talk about how I go to work, and I'm like, oh yes, now that everybody's working from home, they're wearing sweatshirts, t-shirts. I'm like, I would never wear that to work. It's a whole year. We've been working from home for a year, and now I'm like wearing hoodies.
Yes, or no pants. Sometimes you don't have to wear pants to work.
Yes,
it's a magical thing. I mean, totally I have pants on right now. We don't know. You may never know. It's a magical thing. I had my supervisor, who has become, so I'll explain to you, he's amazing. He has become just a great friend. He's actually friends with Julie, our friend Julie, great friend, but he is a white man in his 40s, and he lives in Atlanta. And so we were talking about just like life and advocacy. And he's one of those people that's like fully invested in, I'm going to educate myself to make sure that my kids understand that there are expectations that have been set for different people in different communities, and those expectations aren't real. And so I say all of that to say, we had a really funny dialogue because we were just chatting, and I looked at him and I was like, are you wearing pants? And he's like, there are shorts on. I was like, you've been wearing pants this whole time.
They're like, yo, you got to be free. You got to be free. Clothes are so constraining. It's like when you come in the door, even when we went to work, when you come through the door, you go straight to the bathroom and you don't have to pull anything back up.
Take them off. If you take nothing from today's podcast, here's what we're learning. Take off your clothes. Let them be free. Release yourself. On Zoom. Don't be on Zoom when that happens. So.
You have to master the art of closing your window, or like shutting down your camera, getting up, walking away. Okay.
That's the end. That's all I wanted to share today.
Well, one thing I would love for you to share is you mentioned the title of the book. Like I said, Kristie's a new author. She just put out a book, and So how did you choose the name of the book? Can you explain the name of it too? It's Fearlessly Made You. Right?
Yes. And in case you didn't know, it's right here. I don't just have the book sitting out just so you know.
I have the electronic version. I can bring it on the phone.
Perfect. That's good. So Fearlessly Made You came from a few things. So you guys will hear me talk about my mom a lot. Mama Tobias is amazing. She's a rock star. She came from Jamaica, has this fierce independence because she didn't feel like she had that growing up. And so she's instilled that in us. And now she's, I won't tell you how old she is because she would punch me in the face. She's not a violent woman. She's just aggressive. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
In a loving way, yes.
But she taught us about the concept of you can have the ability to be your own person no matter how people feel about you. And so in that teaching, I learned there's that opportunity to be fearless, and that's not without fear. It's not allowing fear to define you. And so that has come from my parents, and my faith has been very important to me for my entire life. And there's a Bible verse that's Psalm 139, I want to say, but it's, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. I'll give you the exact Bible verse for that. But in that Bible verse, it really talks about what it means to be okay with being exactly who you are. Psalm 139:14 is the actual Bible verse. And then also, as I started thinking about that, I was blogging. So I just kind of shifted from speaking to adding in blogging, because my mom was saying, get your voice out there, because as I was speaking more, I was starting to not allow fear to define me and starting to talk about the difficulties of, what the book is based on, which is my post-traumatic stress disorder, my working through rape and assault and abuse, and saying those words and being uncomfortable saying them, but being comfortable allowing other people to say them as well. So, what I project, other people are also going to project. And in that, as I started blogging, or started to prepare to blog, my mom and I just kind of kept thinking about, but what does that mean to share your story and be okay with it? What does it mean that you are comfortable in your own skin? And that verse just kept coming up. So we've got like fearless. So you are fearfully, wonderfully made. So we're like, maybe fearless. And then there's a song by Jasmine Sullivan called Fearless. And that song just kept playing like on repeat, constantly, like every day I would hear it. And so my mom was like, well, I am fearless. And then we're like, but if we switch it to something that's like catchier, fearlessly made, it's like, but you are the fearlessly made. So then I was like, fearlessly made you. And so it just stuck. And as I've been sharing it more, I get the question a lot of times from people of, well, this book, like this is starting everything. Is like, no, being fearlessly made is who you are. And that is, if you want to put a brand around it or whatever it is, it's the exact person that who you are. The book is a product of that, but being fearlessly made is a way to live. And so that's just kind of where I want this entire thing to go. Like the book's just part of that. It's just the idea of living your life that way.
Yeah, no, oh my goodness. And thanks for sharing, because it helps to put it into perspective, like I'm really enjoying the book, and I mentioned, that we have so many various things in common, we're living like so far away from each other. And
it's ironic to me, because I feel like we're like right next to each other. Like I feel like she's right there. Like
hey, there you go. Yeah, like I was raised in a very faith-based family as well. We moved from Ohio to Boston because my father was in ministry, and that's why we moved to Boston, so he could continue his work in ministry there. And just even, my mom's a mathematician, and so it's kind of funny, like your parents are counselors, my mom's a mathematician, but it just kind of feels like, and maybe this is the same with other people's parents as well, but they just kind of think that you get it, their experience or whatever, like she would say to me, you should know this, it's easy. And I'm like, yeah, it's easy because it, but for them to expect that we also will excel in either the knowledge or whatever that they had raised us with, that we should, follow kind of in this knowledge.
Yeah.
But to be able to challenge it for yourself and to understand, I think maybe I was in my teenage years where I was like, okay, I'm gonna start thinking and living my life for me.
Yes.
Like so much has been what they have instilled in us, and the way that we've been raised. But and I'm the middle child of three. you
Oh,
know. And so just from that point, then deciding like, okay, I'm gonna, this is gonna be my faith for me, I'm gonna make it for me. And playing sports in high school, and then even, having like traumatic, like sexual abuse, um, but just even being a survivor of, I would say, like sexual abuse, it's like being able to enjoy life, but then
yeah.
you also kind of have this remembrance of like past things that have happened.
Trauma
And
happens to everyone, I think. And I think we tell ourselves it doesn't. And so when you
yeah,
have the more invasive traumas like sexual assault and sexual abuse, there's the, oh, you've gone through so much. It's like, let's step that back a bit. Cause yeah, that's a
yeah,
lot, period. But so many people have gone through so much. And there's a unity that happens in understanding that yeah, trauma isn't normal and trauma is not natural, but it's still part of life. And
mhm,
so allowing that trauma to not own you, but you working your way through what am I learning from the disappointments that trauma produces? What am I learning from the discomfort that it produces? And who am I connecting to because of that? So that it's not just insular to me, it's like we are today. It's
yeah,
how are we now connecting and engaging and learning together and building forward? Because you never move on from trauma either. I think people misalign that at some point in time you're going to move on from what this is. It's like, no, but you are going to move forward and you're going
right,
to
yeah,
identify what your move forward looks like.
yeah. It's like one of my friends, there's like trauma all around us, one, may have lost, a job, another one may be sick at this time. And so there's always, different trauma going on around us. And it's like, for some, it's okay, we'll give you your time to grieve, and then you got to get up and keep moving. Like
Yeah,
this happened to you, but it doesn't define you.
exactly.
So
It
you know,
sounds like a book we were just talking about.
yeah, and even when you mentioned that the book is about PTSD, it's like, wait a minute. Usually when you hear that, you think of an older white man, perhaps who may have been in the military, or even, in our age range, you still think of um, people in the military, or even, Black crime, or, police on Black young men crime, like you think when you're thinking of PTSD. And so I think it would be great for our listeners to just hear, as you describe it, like your not development, but your discovery of PTSD, and like how that impacted your life.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and I won't give it away. So, for those of you that are going to read the book, which is all of you listening, I'm sure, when there's a chapter that goes through the what led up to the post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's multiple things. I focus on kind of the one specific incident that lasted for 6 years, but when I went through a lot of therapy, a lot of trauma therapy, and they pieced together other parts of my life that connected the dots to
Yeah.
more. But for the purposes of today, so when I was 14, I was started a relationship with someone that I should not have. The long story short of that is from 14 to 20, I was raped, assaulted, abused on and off throughout that time. And this person ended up being a pedophile.
Yeah.
And he was also a professor not at my university, but at a local university,
Right.
and a white professor. And so when I got out of that, when I was 20, I got out of it in a way that a lot of people do that have gone through any type of assault or abuse. I was sent to the hospital via ambulance. And so it was a moment of when not the end of trauma, but the realization that the immediate danger is over, but that opens up, it kind of breaks open this like, well, what do I do now? Like, what happens now? Because then, there is the whole, and I won't get into all the details of it, because again, reading it and you breaking it down is really so powerful. But I tried to go, tried to prosecute. tried to go down all these routes for the healing from a justice perspective, which I never got. So I never got justice, to be very honest with you, and a lot of people never do. What I then had to do is circle through, well, what does that healing look like for me? And so I had already been going to counseling at my university at the time, and my therapist was amazing. And I guess for me, because of that relationship, I knew something was wrong. And so I started going to counseling about a year before all of that happened or ended. And my therapist connected me with a trauma therapist as well. And so in those moments, he said, I would identify what you have as post-traumatic stress disorder, because it takes about 30 days after you either having gone through something even more traumatic for kind of things to hit for the diagnosis. But he's like, it connects the dots to a lot of what we've talked about. And so I, was on medication, I was in trauma therapy, I was on all the things. And it took a lot for me to understand what post-traumatic stress disorder is, which is basically your reaction. So it's physical, mental, emotional, psychological reaction to a traumatic event. And so I fully believe a lot more people have PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder than we realize. I think there's such a taboo and such a stigma around any type of mental disorder that people don't understand the psychological impact behind it. And I think we use mental issues as just a go for all or a go between for everything. It's like, no, we need to really define and break apart what each of these things mean and why. And so to your point, when I would talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, they're like, oh, were you in the military? No, I did not go through warfare, but I did go through internal warfare. And that's how I kind of define it for people that are trying to figure it out. There's an internal warfare that you go through where when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you kind of lose the person you were before. It's like I was a shell of myself. There are things I don't remember. So there are different signs and symptoms that happen. For me, mine was, and I had a wonderful memory. Mine was memory loss, which is still like frustrating for me to this day, because there are things that like my friends from high school will talk about things and I'm like, I don't even know. Like,
please. I definitely need more help in that area, because there's definitely a lot of stuff that I don't remember. And
it could be from trauma, because people don't pay attention to the biological things that happen. Is it breaks apart synapses in your brain, and so it like burns them. Like it's like significant stress on the body, burning out different parts. And so I think those are the other things, like to your point of, but what does that look like? What does it sound like? It's your body physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically going through trauma over and over and over again, because you have the nightmares, you have the rage. I was suicidal for a very long time. I actually, being in college, they had to take away like all of my sharp objects. Like I had people come in, they're like, we're taking away your scissors, we're taking away your knives. I'm like, any class, like, they took all the things away. But I was surrounded by wonderful people. So, the point of, I had great people around me. I had great resources. I had the ability to be part of great resources. When I graduated from college, I didn't have a lot of money or anything like that. And so there were times where I had to decide between going to trauma therapy and, having a full meal throughout the day, which, is not as bad. Like I was okay. I was fine, but I wasn't fine, internally. So I made those decisions, but it's a lot for people to not understand. And I think it's okay, like, to not understand. What's not okay is to pretend like the trauma in your life hasn't impacted you. Like, that's not okay. Because
exactly. To just sweep it under the rug, because it manifests in everyone in a different way.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, it was like maybe 10 years later before I even realized or started acknowledging that I was raped. I was like, just in the wrong place, wrong time. I didn't really want to be with this person, whatever. But I had gone to therapy because one of my family members passed away. And then, you keep going and going and digging and then explain, some of my past of what happened and how I process feelings and stuff. And I'm like, I guess that was rape, because I definitely did not want it to happen, try to get out, and I'm like, okay, so that wasn't my fault. Okay, and again, thinking this person's like 5 years older than me. Oh no, surprise, guess what, he's like 10 years older than you. Like, okay, great, thanks, good to know
all the things that you didn't want to know. But and I don't know if you feel this way, but I have felt like, I think across communities, the word rape is so jarring to people that we don't say it, and we pretend it doesn't exist. And so, like, there's a difference in rape, there's a difference in sexual assault, and there's no such thing as date rape. Like, I hate when people say date rape. It's like, no, rape is rape. Like you putting hate in front of it doesn't make it any less rape, but you're trying to make it less. It's like, no, rape is a thing and we have to say it because it puts the power back in your hands of, yes, I was raped. No, I am not my rape. Those are two different things. And we have to really own that.
Yeah. And then just owning it, you know, coming to peace with it, living with it, learning to live with it, you know, to keep living through life, you know.
Yes.
People always think,
it's
right?
still there.
People see me, they're like, oh, you're always so happy, you know, oh, everything's great, perfect. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, that's because that's the image I want you to see.
Absolutely. It's the easy image for us, but then it's also like, but to what part, like to what effect? Because then in the background, like there's the vulnerability of saying, yeah, it's the image I'm giving you. I'm not okay. Like I'm exhausted and I'm tired. And I think I was on a friend's podcast a couple of weeks ago, and one of my dear friends lost both of his parents to COVID. And I was on the podcast like an hour after the funeral, and I like legit said, I was like, I'm not okay. And I said it, was like, and I think we have to all be okay with saying like, I'm not okay. Like be real about that, because it allows other people to say, oh, she always looks like she's okay. It's like, yeah, it's okay. Like you don't have to be okay.
Yeah. And I think that I did that for so long that it even took my friends and family around me to get used to me saying I'm not okay. And to not think it was a joke, because they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, no, seriously, I'm really having a rough time right now. And I just kind of want to talk about it. And because, you know, for most parts, they'll be like, oh, you're so funny. And I'm like, no, seriously, listen to me.
Yes.
And, you know, and that's just another, you know, plug also for counseling and therapy, because and it's becoming, and I think the millennials and, you know, the new Gen Zs, you know, they're a lot more comfortable with therapy nowadays. Like in the 90s, you know, right?
Going through all the things.
Right? They're like, oh yeah, you know, it's one of my normal, you know, health benefits. I'm going to go do this, go do that, or, you know, take advantage of, you know, the opportunities of, you know, counselors in school or different community organizations. But yeah, they're a lot more open to it now than, you know, like 10, 20 years ago. And I'm really appreciative of that, you know, that it's
breaks apart that stigma, right?
Yeah.
There's the suck it up generation as well, because I'm like, I guess I'm considered, which I take offense to this, I'm considered an old millennial, and I'm like, what does that mean? How am I an old, like, am I old? Like, what? Like,
you're on the cusp.
How many questions?
How about that? You're on the cusp. Yeah.
I'm on the cusp. I don't know what it is, but it's like that whole like Gen X and then baby boomers. It's like the suck it up generation. I think Gen X especially is like, because y'all,
they didn't even really believe in therapy. That why would a teenager need therapy? What is stressing you out in your life? Your job is to go to school and get good grades.
You'll be fine.
What could possibly be stressing the youth today?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I just remember I was raising my daughter, you know, like, okay, just, you know, I'm from the suck it up generation, and I'm like, okay, tell me about your feelings, you know, like trying to like appreciate that there may be bigger things stressing her out than, you know, what I see on the surface.
Yeah.
And then sticking up for her for that, because others would be like, what does she have to worry about? And I'm like, kids in school these days, it's a lot of stress. You know, you got your racial, you got your academics, you got, you know, the friends, you got, you know, all of it.
Access to everything now too. So they're seeing everything, like everything on the news, whether it's fake news or not, like they're just seeing all these things, and it's just a lot.
It's just too much. Oh my goodness. So what are some of the things that you do to relax? Like what are, you know, we talk a lot about like empowering and freedom and, you know, releasing ourselves, but what are some things that you like to do to relax?
I drink a lot of wine. There's a chapter dedicated to wine. It's like, do I really need a glass of wine? I'm like, yes, you do. I do. Like, I do.
Whenever I can, I love to go to a winery with some friends, have some wine time, you know, on Zoom. Yes.
I love the culture behind wine. Honestly, wine and whiskey are kind of cultures that I really enjoy and I really love. But the reasoning behind it is I enjoy the experience. So they're like, going to the winery, having a day, like going through the grapes and all, just understanding and kind of learning about it. But outside of that, I do work out a lot. So I cycle. I do Ride Society here in Pensacola is amazing. My friend Clara owns it. I love it. I used to have a bodybuilding trainer, so I used to bodybuild. So I do a lot of weightlifting as well. My trainer, is a really good friend of mine. So those are kind of the big things, like just to release. I always need a little bit of a release. So working out gives me that release for sure. And then writing, of course, has become a lot of an outlet now. So I try and blog like once every other week, and just to kind of get that out there too. And then I do a lot of reading. I'm always reading within, I do read the Bible a lot, but I read a lot more like devotional books, because I find that just the words in the Bible are great, but I need kind of some perspective sometimes to kind of piece things together. Yes. So I do a lot of reading, faith-based. I do a lot of professional. I do a lot of reading.
Yeah. I'm constantly reading a book, usually like 2 or 3 at a time,
Yes,
and
me too.
one maybe for commute, one maybe to relax for bed with that glass of wine,
Always that glass of wine.
But
Always. That's the one thing I will say I miss about living in New York is I would go from Midtown to the Bronx like every day, because we for some reason lived in Midtown and worked in the Bronx, and then I always had my commute book. So I always had something I was listening to. I miss that, because now it's like, well, I'm going to go from my bedroom to my office.
Exactly. I started inventing commutes. So because I went from the bedroom to the table, I'm going outside, walk around the block for like an hour, and then come back in.
That is a good idea. Oh, I love it.
I mean, it's the weather here isn't as beautiful as it is in Florida, but I'll bundle up and, just get out there.
It's hot right now in Florida, but beautiful is right. You're right. We don't get the snow. I did do this thing, I will have to tell you. So when we were in the height of lockdown, I did every day I was in a different place. So in my house, I started putting wine glasses in different rooms. And so I went on a winery tour. And then I did a escape room in my house as well. My family was highly entertained by that, because I had a little whiteboard and I would write riddles to figure out what drink I wanted. So, and then I would put the drink in whatever location the riddle told me to put it in.
Oh my goodness. That's that creativity that we love, because, we have to figure out some way to keep ourselves amused, throughout this whole pandemic.
Amen to that. Yes. My dog was entertained. He's like, I don't even know what you're doing right now, but I'm entertained.
I'm here for it. I'm going to just follow you around, watch you drink that wine. Okay, follow you around some more and watch you drink that.
That's our life. That's our life. Just me and the dog.
Exactly. Well, Kristie, I mean, thank you so much. I'm just so thankful that you, had the time to join me today, that, we could share, some of our story, but even more importantly, share our experiences that others could relate to, that if you guys have any comments, go ahead and leave them, for the podcast. Follow Kristie. Let us know where people can find you, so that, they can follow you, whether it's your blog or your book or podcast, that they can stay up to date on what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah. So my website is fearlesslymadeyou.com. It has access to the book. You can find the book anywhere, actually, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of that. If you live in Pensacola, Florida, you can find it at the local bookstore, Bodacious bookstore. But yeah, you can follow me on Insta, Tobias85, or on any other platform, Facebook or LinkedIn, Kristie Tobias. But yes, please, I love connecting and engaging with people, sending notes, comments, messages, and I'd love to engage with you.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. Well, our engagement was quite wonderful ourselves. So we'll have to do it again with some glasses of wine with us.
Yes. Always with wine.
And I'll be sure to put your info down below too, so people can, click and find you and all that good stuff. So thanks everyone once again for listening to MProper Mimi, where we empower women with our words and our stories and our experiences. We want you to be able to feel free to speak about how you feel at home, work, and play. And there's nothing improper about that. So anytime you are listening to your favorite podcast, wherever you're listening, you can find MProper Mimi there as well. All right, ciao. Thanks.